Hello, everybody, and firstly, apologies for being a bit late. It took me slightly longer than I'd hoped to get here this evening. I understand that we are recording, but we cannot live stream currently. So the waiting masses will have to wait until tomorrow, I think, to see this this exciting broadcast on Catch Up. First of all, welcome everybody to Cabinet. I'll start with apologies for absence, and strangely and ironically, considering he's there online, I think I probably have to formally record Councillor Turner's apologies, although, as we can see, he is present. Just doesn't count for the sort of strange rules of local government, at least at the moment. There is hope that this may change. So, but we're very glad you can join us, Ed, because there's obviously a lot on the agenda, which is yours. So from our perspective, we count you as present. Are there any declarations of interest? Not seeing any, so thank you. We have no addresses and questions by members of the public. We have no council addresses on items for decision on the Cabinet agenda that I've been notified of. We have no council addresses on neighbourhood issues, but we do have an item raised by a Cabinet member, and Councillor Anna Elton, over to you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I would just like to take this opportunity again to show appreciation to both City and ODS employees who stepped up yet again in response to both the flash flooding at the end of September and the storm surge flooding at the end of November. Putting up barriers, manning pumps, finding working toilets for people, actually, fielding queries, getting information out, working with the EA and the emergency services, and checking in on vulnerable residents and cleaning up afterwards. The city showed up and was there for people in a way that is unfortunately not true everywhere. I'm also pretty mindful that this is only the beginning of the winter, and our future in this city is warmer and wetter winters, and unfortunately probably more flooding. Because we are Oxford and we like to do things properly, we get 3 different types of flooding in the city, which all need slightly different approaches to deal with. And we've also had all 3 this year already. So with river and groundwater flooding, this administration is always and will continue to support the Oxford Flood Alleviation Scheme, and we trust it is slowly getting closer to actually being built. The city has also started a piece of work to make community flood plans with residents in both South and West Oxford to build capacity, knowledge and resilience where it is most needed. We're also doing a survey of all of the ditches and streams and working out who is responsible for them and what maintenance is needed. September also showed us the damage that surface water flooding can do. So there is another piece of work to do there with the residents in different parts of the city to usual, working out how we can adapt and mitigate the worst of that. I gave a very similar speech to this at the first cabinet meeting of the year, and here I am doing it again at the last cabinet member meeting of the year. It would be fantastic if we didn't have to do all of this work and Oxford didn't flood. Sadly, though, this is our future, so we must and we will. Finally, I just want to thank Richard Adams, James Barlow, Matthew Cope, and all of the frontline staff at ODS for their fantastic past and future work keeping residents in this city safe from flooding.
Thank you very much, Anna, and I'm sure we'd all like to share in your thanks to all of those who worked in the cold and the wet and through the night to keep everybody in the city safe and dry as dry as possible. So thank you very much for making those comments, and we absolutely concur with them. Right, I think that takes us on to item 7 on the agenda, which is scrutiny reports, which we seem to have quite a lot of. So Catherine, over to you.
Thank you. I'll try and dash through them. What I would say, just as a new scrutiny item that we've put in for earlier in the year, we will also look at how the city works with all different partners on flood response, and really also want to echo the compliments that Anna has just expressed. So with the scrutiny meetings we've had since the last cabinet meeting, we had a committee meeting on the 18th of November, which was an extraordinary one to consider a call in of a cabinet decision on the 16th of October related to an agreement, entering into an option agreement on land on Foxwell Drive. Just to say on that point, the committee discussed various points of objections, including the length of option agreement, conflict of interest and risks requiring further scrutiny, and particular concerns related to the separation of planning and land disposal processes. And after deliberation, the committee agreed to uphold the original decision made by Cabinet. So there's, I think, nothing else that needs to be said on that. We then had a scrutiny committee, the normal one, on the 2nd of December, and where we considered the Thriving Community Strategy Report and the Authority Monitoring Report and Infrastructure Funding Statement. There were 7 recommendations presented on that. And I'd just like to thank Councillor Makonge, Councillor Arshad, Hagen, Lewisman and Paula Redway for coming to that meeting. Just on that, just the topics that we discussed related to the Thriving Community Strategy Report, that those of you who I just mentioned attended, were related to the incorporation of data in the report that is both comparable and also looks at outcomes as well to provide a clearer picture around the strategy's impact. There was a call for stronger member engagement in the development and review of locality plans, because this will influence the upcoming the revised version of this strategy. And there were some concerns around the breadth of some of the plans as well. There was also the success of the early pregnancy unit assessment in Rose Hill, which is run in partnership with the NHS, was also complemented. And that, I think, leads to the recommendations that you have before you on that. So I'll pause at this point in case there are any feedback you have on the recommendations there. I won't go through them all, just one by one.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. So I note that these are recommendations which have all been agreed. So I think there's probably little further comment to make, but Councillors Joe and Lubna, if there's anything you want to add. Yeah, Joe.
Yes, just to thank you, Catherine, the Chair, and the scrutiny for scrutinizing the Thriving Community Strategy. As you know, this is a bigger document that cut across different cabinet members, and we work together with the our partners. So we did accept all the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So then moving on to the Authority Monitoring Report and Infrastructure Funding Statement. Thank you to Councillor Upton, David Butler, Sarah Harrison, Rachel Nixon and Lorraine Freeman, who all joined and provided valuable insights during the discussions. I think here really the main concern that was focused on by scrutiny was around the loss of family homes to students and the use of existing student accommodation. So really the broader implications of student housing and increasing numbers from the 2 main universities in the city on the private rental sector. So the concerns raised were how we need better data around what the future demand is going to be, and also looking at how that unmet demand is going to be met, and whether or not there's a possibility for it to be met outside of the city, but in close proximity. So the effective use of university-owned land near city boundaries to address accommodation needs rather than within the ring road, as it were. So there were 2 recommendations that came out of that, I think one referred to this unmet student accommodation demand, and sites identified by these institutions to address their accommodation requirements, and then the second recommendation focused on working together with the 2 universities to ensure their land holdings, including those located at or near city boundaries, are effectively used to meet that demand. I'll pause there for a response. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Louise, to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, as I think we tried to make clear at the meeting, the Authority Monitoring Report is a rather dry document that is basically just presenting data. It's data that is entirely concerned with monitoring whether we are measuring up to our local plan policies or not. So although all the things you discussed were really interesting and we would like to have a handle on those things, it's not something that we can then sort of lever into the annual monitoring report. But as you say, I mean, some of those things you're asking for are in there already. We already do publish the number of students who are living outside of university provided accommodation. But that's because we have a policy that specifies if it goes above a threshold, we can refuse planning permission on new academic space. So while I agree with the sentiment, we couldn't agree with actually adding that into the report. So the first one was a no. And then the second one, yes, essentially we already do engage with both universities and encourage them to house as many of their students as possible on their own land holdings. Again, using that, the policy H9 as the lever to do that. Yes, so I think, you know, other than the fact that, you know, we talk to every landowner in the city, actually asking them to, if they would be bringing forward land for housing and homes and things, I don't think there's anything more we can do with the universities.
Thank you, Louise. Back to you, Catherine.
Thank you. So then that concludes the meeting on the 2nd of December. There have been a number of panels that have sat since then, and also before. So there was the Climate Environment panel, and that I'd like to thank all of those who attended. I think Mish and Anna were there, amongst others. So sorry if I don't list everybody. The panel met to discuss two issues. One was the Eco Moorings project update, and there's some great developments going on there. And then secondly, on the deliverability of solar opportunities at the council car parks. Now, there were 4 recommendations in total related to those 2 reports. One specifically to the Eco Mooring project was around communication with local residents and boating communities around some of the planned work with the installation of eco moorings at Aristotle Lane and the temporary towpath closure, and just ensuring that relevant members are kept informed related to that. On the second item on the council car parks, there were a number of recommendations which I see that you have agreed to, so I won't go into the details. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Anna, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, so we had the long-awaited solar canopies paper, which I think everybody enjoyed. So the scrutiny recommendation for the eco moorings we're accepting in part. So, you know, we will be, it's, you know, the engagement is mostly with the boating community with this. Basically, there is not sufficient budget to go and do a letter drop for all of the sort of like surrounding residents, which is why we've only accepted part of the recommendation.
Thanks very much, Anna. Back to you, Catherine.
Thank you. So the final 2 meetings to report back on was the Housing and Homelessness panel on the 27th of November. Now, this was an extraordinary meeting, and it was convened to consider the HRA 40-year business plan, asset management strategy and 5-year investment programme, and also the tenancy engagement and management paper. And there were 2 recommendations related to that. I'm assuming that this is Linda, so I'll pause here and then see if you've got any response to those recommendations. Thank you.
I'm only seeing one recommendation, but am I missing something?
No, sorry, it is one recommendation, you're right, I think.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay,
Linda,
thank you.
over to you.
Oh, so which recommendation are we dealing with here?
So I'm looking at the one on tenancy engagement, but maybe is there a separate one on the HRA asset management strategy that I have missed?
I think it's just the one recommendation, sorry.
So there's a recommendation I'm aware of. There's the one about engagement, about young people, which I was very pleased to accept. It's something I'm very keen that we bring out, and that we absolutely make sure we're listening to young people living in our council properties, about what they've got to say about how we deal with ASB, you know, looking after the estate, looking after their home, and also, you know, what we're spending on youth ambition from the HRA fund. I think that's a really valuable thing for us to hear their voices, but I think there's a really good opportunity to actually empower young people and give them an opportunity to get involved in something as well. So I'm very pleased with that recommendation. I look forward to taking that forward. And then there was another recommendation about tenant satisfaction, which was just drawing out a discrepancy between what we've got in our corporate KPIs and what was in the document. And we've accepted that recommendation about you know, being consistent in that regard.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, sorry, I'd shuffled my papers too carelessly and I missed that one, so thank you. Right, I think that's all of it, isn't it, Catherine?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just to say, there was the finance performance panel on the 4th of December, but there were no recommendations related to that. But just for the record, the meeting considered the integrated performance report Q2 24-25 and the Treasury Management mid-year review from April to September 2024. And that concludes the remarks today. So thank you.
Well, thank you as always, Catherine. Feels like scrutiny must have been pretty busy because that's an awful lot of work and an awful lot of papers discussed. So thank you very much for all your work and contributions. As always, you're very welcome to stay or to leave as you see fit. I think we are now on to the Housing Revenue Account business plan. So Linda, I'm guessing you're leading on this. So thank you very much and over to you.
Thank you. I know that all cabinet members very pleased that this city council owns our own council homes, and not only that, but we're building new council homes. And you'll all know that the finances relating to our council homes are kept separate from the council's general fund in our housing revenue account. And this report, while of course it will need to be updated in response to various factors in the future, is our 40-year business plan which sets out the principles for making sure we continue to be a good landlord to our tenants, continue to be able to invest in our council homes and have the capacity to build more of the affordable housing this city so desperately needs, all while keeping within responsible, sustainable levels of borrowing. This plan shows that our plans are affordable, although there's a period of 3 years from 2028 when it is very close to the margins at the moment. This report sets out how we will be working to improve that situation and build extra capacity for investment. So options include reviewing the tenure mix of our affordable housing supply programme, working with ODS and our other suppliers to drive efficiency and reduce costs, looking to maximise income where possible and regenerate or replace our worst performing housing stock with new improved homes. So taken together, these measures will help us pare back our HRA debt and increase our headroom for future borrowing in order to fund future priorities and continue to be the best possible social landlord for decades to come.
Okay.
So that's all I've got to say. I know we've got officers online and Nerys in the room.
Thank you very much,
anything
Linda.
to add?
And I also share the hooray. Nerys, did you want to add anything? Microphone, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, that wasn't working. Try again.
Nothing from me, Susan. Peter, something.
I know, but sorry. Had to be there for the record. Sorry, Peter, did you want to add anything?
No, Susan, I think Linda's covered it all. I think the important point that she's made is that what the business plan does show is that the plans that we've got for managing the stock and for the council house building over the medium term, they are affordable. And I think the other point it does show is that we can give consideration beyond 2031 to thinking through what might be the future investment plans as the HRA borrowing headroom improves.
Thank you very much. So I'm open to questions and comments. Nigel and then Anna.
Well, Linda, I think it's a really great piece of work, so thank you very much. Can I say that? I mean, I think a lot of work's gone in from officers as well, and it's very comprehensive. And the thing that gives me comfort and you know, a lot of pleasure is that we're finally getting to grips with a long-term repair plan for ODS, because they're the other side of the equation. They're having to deliver the services in terms of repair and maintenance of our council housing and flats. And it's good to see there's a proper long-term plan going on here. I think we all accept that there has to be a drive for efficiency. It really leaps off the page at me, 5% annually. And I think that is something that ODS needs to really focus upon. And the other thing is that obviously if you have a planned repair programme, hopefully, and you should have a less fast responsive repair programme, i.e. in emergencies, because you'll have done more work up front to prevent that happening. So hopefully that will also give us value for money. I also took comfort from the very detailed appendices around better clienting, which has been an area where, you know, clienting has not always been as strong as it could and should have been in the past, and I think we really need to follow that through. So I think it's you know, a really strong piece of work and to be commended. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Anna.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add a bit more colour to the sort of retrofit and decarbonisation bit of this paper. And you know, 28% of our capital like proposed spend here. So you know, we've got a commitment to getting to 95% of our housing stock to EPC-C, which you can't say very quickly, or better by 2030. As referenced in the report, officers have been working really hard to get a baseline of the sort of actual energy efficiency state of where all of our properties actually are. This work is currently paused with central government taking a very welcome look at EPC criteria. And yet the new methodology will appear in the spring, so we can restart them then. You know, what this means in reality is we have between, I think, 1,400 and I think 2,400-ish properties that will need some fabric improvements. Basically, there is, you know, the uncertainties because we haven't finished all of the surveys yet. Yeah, to bring them up to EPC standard. This will be funded with some of our own capital, as laid out in the paper, and hopefully a contribution or two from the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, which we'll be bidding for in the autumn with our new knowledge of the energy efficiency of our stock. So yeah, you know, and what this means for tenants on the ground is warm homes that are cheaper to heat, and that is very welcome indeed.
Thanks very much, Anna. And if I may, I'll just add a couple of comments of my own, which is to kind of reflect back, I think, on the comments that you started with, Linda, which is, you know, how lucky and proud we are to have our own council stock, because it does make a huge difference. And I'm very conscious that we're the only council in Oxfordshire that does, and that actually I think increasingly our fellow district councils in Oxfordshire look with some envy at the fact that we have social housing that we can control the rents of, and we can also ensure that the tenants' experience, which obviously we're going to come on to, is a better one. And I think that for all of us who also have housing association properties in our wards, we've all sort of had a slightly different experience, I have to say, with trying to raise casework on behalf of tenants in those properties. So there are many disadvantages, I think, of not having your own council housing. And I'm very glad that back in the olden days, when I was first on this council, in spite of great encouragement to get rid of our council housing, we didn't, and we stood out and we held on to it. And it was a pretty difficult decision to make at the time, but I think it was a really important one. And, you know, not only that, but we are making, we've got a programme here which is improving it, which is building more. And we know that we need to do both of those things. And we've got a budget here in the HRA that adds up. So I would absolutely echo the comments from around the cabinet to commend you and officers for the work that's gone into this. And I think it's something we can all be very proud of. Linda.
Just before we vote, I would like to place on record thanks to Lourdes de Barry, who's been working with us on a temporary basis to support us with this work. Who's online at the moment, and I think she's done a great job. So thank you, Lourdes.
Hear, hear. Sorry, I missed calling on you earlier. Is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I just think it's a very good report that sets out a good path for the council to take forward and improve how it delivers its works to tenants. So it's tenants are going to benefit from this very structured way of working, in particular holding to account ODS for the work that they deliver, good value for money as well. So thank you, and it's been very good working with everyone.
Great, well, thank you very much. Right, unless anyone's got any further questions or comments, and I'm not seeing any, I think we are moving to recommendations. So we are asked to adopt the new HRA 40-year business plan and agree to implementing the actions and preparing the options for investment as set out in the report. Can we all agree those recommendations? Fantastic, thank you very much, everybody. So we now move on to agenda item 9. Which is the HRA Asset Management Strategy and 5-year investment programme. Linda, back over to you.
Thank you. So this report provides even more detail about how we'll be investing in our council-owned homes over the next 5 years. There is a total of £250 million budgeted to be spent on our existing council homes over the next 5 years. And I'm very pleased that we're moving away from the use of delegated budgets, and we're now in a position to devote most of this investment, £177 million, to planned works which will be data-driven and scoped out based on the stock condition survey, which I was pleased to hear today that we're now over 70% of the way through, as well as information we hold about repairs and other service requests, and perhaps most importantly, what tenants themselves tell us are their priorities. So approximately half of this work will be awarded directly to Oxford Direct Services under the rules governing LATCOs. And ODS will, of course, be able to bid for the other work, which will be put out to open tender. And ODS will also continue to be responsible for responsive repairs. And we've budgeted £70 million for this vital area of work over the next 5 years. So I hope this 5-year plan and the new certainty about workload and budgets will support ODS with their business planning, which I know is something that they've struggled with in the recent past, and help them to deliver the efficiencies and value for money, which we all want from the HRA and that we know our tenants deserve.
Thanks very much, Linda. So again, Peter, Nerys, Lord, anything you wish to add?
I think Linda's covered it for me, Susan.
Nerys? No, nothing. And Lord? No. Yep. Okay, so open to questions or comments. Nigel?
Well, again, I mean, the level of certainty and long-term planning that is offered to ODS in this document is very, very welcome. And the quid pro quo then has to be, as you said, that with that guarantee of work comes a drive for greater efficiency and not living from one year to the next. I suppose the challenge for me in it is there's quite a complicated HRA asset management plan appendices with many, many actions at the back. And I just wondered how this is going to be managed, because to chase down the work against all these different categories, or only 5 or 6 points against each one, is pretty significant. And I wonder whether whether the resourcing is really there, the project management there, is the organisation there to do that, because it's a pretty daunting set of requirements. Is for anybody to be keeping it across all that and keeping the balls all spinning in the right way. So it's really an observation and a request that there is such a thing. There is proper project management. Otherwise, we will not know really in the end whether we've succeeded or not.
Linda, do you want to respond to that?
It's
fine.
Operational.
It felt like quite an operational question, I agree. Nerys, are you able to respond to that? Or was Peter wants to respond, right? Peter.
Yeah, yes, a very good point. So we're in the process of preparing a delivery work plan, which will actually embrace all the work strands that need to be taken forward and structure that in a way that it involves both ourselves and ODS in a collaborative program of delivery. And as part of that, there will be a governance structure around it. So in that sense, we will know what needs to be done by whom and when. And part of that will also be to try to think through what is the right resource in for the delivery over the next 6 months to a year. The other thing that should be noted is that we have made provision for a 1-year transition. And so the transition should be that buffer year that allows us to do that work planning, including for ODS to have time to make any adjustments that they may need. So I think we will have that delivery plan for the new year, which I'm happy to sit down and discuss with yourselves. And we are working with ODS in that preparation.
Thanks very much, Peter. Oh, sorry. Before I call on you, Ed, Caroline would like to add something. So 1 moment.
I just wanted to reiterate what Peter said, but also to say that we're actually, depending on the approval tonight, bringing a discussion of that delivery plan to CMT next week to begin that, because I think it's really important with Peter's imminent departure as our interim director, that is properly understood and known collectively by CMT. So just backing that up, really.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Ed, over to you.
Thank you, and apologies that I'm joining you remotely. Appreciate both this report and the last one. I didn't join in the cheering because if I was, cheering on my own in a hotel room, it might have been a bit unsettling for other people staying here. But I wonder if officers could maybe add a little bit of colour about specifically the likely things that would be money would be spent on energy efficiency works as part of this. As members, we had a bit of a conversation. I think it would just add a bit of colour to that if they could maybe explain the sort of things, because there are obviously different strands of energy efficiency work people might have in mind. And I've read the kind of obviously the documents and the actions there in terms of planning, but maybe some concrete examples would be quite interesting.
Thank you, Ed. Who would like to pick up that one? Peter.
Yeah, I'll start, and I think Lourdes may come in. So, as part of the 5-year investment plan, I think I think is to align the 5-year investment plan that it is going to 2030. So we've got to have in our sights the 2030 target for EPCs to reach that standard. And so I think within the plan, we specifically said there's an investment of around £40 million, and that is coming out of the HRA. Now, essentially, that will be the fabric measures that we're investing in normally, window replacements and so on. I think the piece of work we are currently trying to do, Ed, is trying to align that to the number of units, buildings, homes, which are below EPC, and to ensure that we do pick up, I think it was mentioned, around the 1,400, which require the investment in the fabric measures to take them to the EPCC. So that's the piece of work we will need to do to make sure that that investment is targeted at hitting those so that we can meet the 2030 target. So we are anticipating that the HRA will invest, I think it's 37 million actually, and the SHDF will also make a contribution.
Thanks very much, Peter. Did anyone else want to add anything? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that answer. Any other questions or comments on this report? I'm not seeing any, in which case, can we move to the recommendations, which are quite lengthy, so I'm not going to read them all out. You'll be delighted to hear. But suffice it to say, they are set out on page 53 of the report. Is everyone happy to agree the recommendations? Good, thank you very much. Thank you very much to officers. So we are now on to the third housing report here, which is the one on the reset of Oxford City Council's approach to tenant engagement and tenancy management, which we referred to earlier. So Linda, again, over to you.
Thank you. This is a very high-level report because it's essential that the new plans for tenant engagement are developed in conjunction with tenants, and that we take on board feedback and ideas from the consultation, which will happen after tonight if we agree this report. But there are some important principles here, which I'm confident will improve our tenant engagement work for the better. Firstly, we're aiming to involve a lot more tenants. And secondly, there will be a direct link into our council's governance structure with a new tenants representative forum set up, which the Cabinet Member for Housing will be a member of, and they will be able to bring items from that forum directly here into Cabinet for consideration, which I think is a welcome development. On the reorganisation of landlord services, I think what tenants want to see, what councillors want to see, is housing officers out on our estates being proactive, picking up jobs which need attention, and having a closer relationship with our tenants, understanding their needs and being responsive to requests. And I'm confident that the reorganisation our Head of Housing has planned will deliver on those key priorities. I'll hand over to Nerys to tell us more about it. That's okay.
Thank you, Linda. Nerys.
I don't have that much more to add, apart from a bit of colour, maybe if that's helpful. So this is really bringing the sort of people aspect of our landlord function, into compliance with the expectations of the regulator and the expectations we have as a council to deliver for our tenants. So we will, you know, we are looking here really in terms of tenant engagement to strengthen their voice and for that voice to have meaning really at the top table. And I hope that the structure set out in the report sort of sets out a really clear way in which to have that kind of two-way conversation from the landlord to the tenant and obviously clearly back the other way, working kind of cooperatively together to improve our services really, because that our tenants should be able to directly influence the services that they receive from us. So that's the first aspect of the proposal, and then obviously it sits within the broader reorganisation of landlord services so that that the broader service to tenants becomes more modern and compliant with the Act. And really, in principle, I'm looking to deliver a proactive and a preventative service that really, where we know our tenants and we know their needs and we're responding to those quickly in its simplest way. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nerys, and I certainly very much welcome this paper, and I think it's absolutely right that obviously we're just doing the broad brush approach and we work with tenants to actually establish exactly what they want in terms of this engagement. But I very much welcome the reorganisation as you describe it as well, because I think that's going to be very important. Are there any further questions or comments? No? Okay. Well, in that case, can we just move to the recommendations? So everyone happy? Yeah, Lubna's getting ahead of herself, but yeah. Lovely. I think we're all very supportive. So thank you very much for all the work on that. Lovely. Well, thank you very much for all the housing reports. We now move on to the medium-term financial strategy and budget for consultation. Councillor Turner, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. It's a tradition that I don't give a full-on kind of budget speech, and there'll be a lot of discussion about this. There was a very lengthy finance panel where I think people agreed to get their questions in. The finance panel have got lots of sessions planned to look over this. We're of course about to go out to consultation, and I'm pretty sure it will get a good airing at full council, when we debate it before no doubt being passed unanimously and without amendment. There are maybe one or two things just quickly to say. One, just on a sort of procedural note, there are a couple of errata, unfortunately, in relation to fees and charges. And so please, could I sort of move that we take the amended versions rather than those which were initially printed? Apologies for that. These things do happen. Secondly, and perhaps related, I just want to pay tribute to the finance officers led by Nigel Kennedy. This has been a fast-moving picture. So obviously there's a new government. The new government is looking to make some changes in the area of local government finance, and things have continued to move really at pace with different policy announcements and so on. We're still waiting for details of the settlement. And I think it'd be fair to say there's more uncertainty than there was in previous years about that, because there are some policy intentions which are stated, but we're not quite sure how those will play out for ourselves. So the new government, for example, which I can understand and support, wants to put more emphasis even next year on deprivation, for example. But we're not sure how exactly that will play out for ourselves. Obviously, Oxford is a very unequal city, but it also will have an interplay, for example, with the nature of our council tax base, that sort of thing. So this is a snapshot in time. I mean, while on the subject of the new government, I mean, I think it's very important that local authorities continue to make the case for being properly funded. I sense there's much more of a recognition than there has been hitherto about some of the big challenges we face. So it was good, for example, in the budget that the Chancellor announced that there would be particular support for local authorities with temporary accommodation costs. That's good. But of course, hearing about potential support isn't the same as actually receiving it, and I think we'll need to continue to be quite assertive. In terms of the substance of it, maybe just three things to highlight. One is in terms of political choices. There's quite a lot here on the bread and butter, Susan. So clearly, we want to deliver services properly and efficiently, and the fact our resources get more and more constrained means in a way we do really need to focus on getting the basics right. And I'm pleased that there are proposals in here, for example, about cutting the grass more regularly. I think we've all had some pretty robust feedback from people on how well the county councils, their reductions to verge cutting haven't gone. Street cleaning, litter picking in parks, that sort of thing. I think also that links to our survey of local people, our citizen survey, and you know, those are things that people just expect their council to get right, and I think we want to do that. Secondly, maybe to flag that, you know, in accordance, we've got a reasonable first year position. We expected to draw on reserves for the next couple of years. That's part of our kind of wrapping up with the COVID legacy, but the first year position is okay. However, things get significantly tighter. We think there'll be a business rate reset and changes to business rates. But also, of course, there comes a point where you shouldn't be drawing on reserves anymore. Put all those things together, the position in future years is much tighter. And as we were talking about, Susan, with our trade union colleagues, I think it was just yesterday, it's really important, therefore, to plan for the medium term. A lot of councils would just be proposing a one-year budget and then having some unallocated savings in future years. Instead, I think we are trying to put the hard yards in now, because if you plan, then you're much less likely to have unpleasant surprises later on. And things, for example, where if you are looking to reduce the size of your workforce, you can do that in a voluntary way, as through people naturally leaving the organisation. Thirdly, I just wanted to say something about risk. And apologies again for repeating comments that I sort of make each year, but there are significant risks in future years, and I think one of the bigger ones is around company dividends and also interest payments. You know, we as a council have got our Oxford model. We effectively insource work into our wholly owned companies, building houses, particularly council homes, with OX Place, and also ODS selling services to others. You know, that's a great thing. It means that it isn't the shareholders of Taylor Wimpey or Biffa or whoever that are profiting from this. Instead, the money comes back to local people ultimately and supports services. But if homes don't get built, or if contracts aren't won, then those dividends in the first instance, you know, won't come, and in the second instance are in jeopardy. And so there is naturally a higher level of risk there. Now, I think Nigel would say that he's comfortable with the level of balances and reserves, which we anticipate throughout the MCFS, but we can't be going down below that really. And you know, it is just a riskier business running a council in a progressive way, where you try and insource work and you know, maintain services as best you can, than simply running around and cutting everything and there's nothing left. There's no risk to that. Sometimes people say to me, no risk, no fun. We do have, you know, we provide the services here, but our model is inherently a riskier one. And so we just have to be, I think, quite mindful of that. So with thanks to the officers for having got us to this point in, I think, quite challenging circumstances, I'd like to move the recommendations and I hope we can agree this and go out to consultation.
Thank you very much, Ed. And thank you very much for the huge amount of work that I know you personally have put into this, as well as officers. So as always, we're incredibly grateful to you. Nigel, did you want to add anything?
Just a couple of things, actually. And I suppose just to highlight the good news here, basically, which is, you know, we can see a way of presenting a 4-year balanced plan. It's a 4-year balanced plan. Today, there were announcements, at least from 2 other authorities, one that is starting to act and make massive redundancies, basically, and another that's saying, you know, if we don't get a 25% increase in council tax, they will issue a Section 114 notice, basically. That is the state of affairs that the local authorities are in, and this authority is setting a 4-year balanced plan, basically. How have we done it? We use reserves. We are using 5.5 million reserves, as Ed said. We produce more efficiencies, another 3.8 million. And we've increased our income by over £8 million over the life of the plan, basically. And last but not least, our reliance on our companies. They will deliver over £19 million worth of dividends, basically, over the next 4 years. That is a huge sum of money, basically, and cannot be taken as a given for all the reasons that Ed said, actually. And last but not least, basically, is the uncertainty around the budget announcement from the government, really. We still don't know what that means, basically. There's all high-level figures, 3.2% increase in core spending power, and lots said about different various grants. But as Ed says, until the money's in the bank, basically, we cannot be complacent. We can't rely on that. So it's good news that we've set the plan, but there's still some things to play out. And certainly over the medium term, basically, we can't be complacent. Actually, you know, we've got to bring all these income streams in, basically, to balance our books. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, and obviously our huge thanks to you and to your team, because we completely recognise the difficulties of putting together a budget, particularly in the sort of, well, it always seems to be challenging because we're always putting together the budget before we've actually got the financial settlement for a start, and there's no change there, unfortunately, although possibly a promise in future years of a little bit more certainty around that, which will definitely help. But yeah, a big thank you. Now, as Ed started out by saying, we don't traditionally have a great debate at Cabinet because we will be having it at Council. So unless anyone's got anything urgent to say, I suggest you save it for Council. Joey has something urgent to say, so off you go.
Yes, this is not probably related directly to the budget, but just wanted to comment on the reform for the business rates. I know if this goes ahead, it was going to have a massively impact on smaller businesses in Oxford. We have problems like closing of the Botry Road. I was just wondering, Ed, if there's an organization or is it a local government association that is lobbying for this reform. In the back the days, it was used to be small business federations or something.
Thanks, JV. I think there are different things going on here. And in fact, I enjoyed quite a long discussion of all of them at the LGA yesterday. So one point is about the business rate reset. So where, you know, at the moment we get a share of additional growth from a certain point in time, and that system would be reset, and there'd be a new kind of equalisation, and that would be something which wouldn't affect small businesses. I don't think it would affect us as a council in terms of the amount of money we get. Alongside that, if I understand it right, fairer funding and changes there, which are likely to come in, would change the way that redistributed business rates are allocated. So again, that wouldn't, I think, impact on small businesses in any direct way. There were then some changes announced in the budget reliefs, and some of them were retained but reduced. And you know, I think we've heard, for example, from hospitality businesses that they would have much preferred it if they'd had the higher level of relief, and I can sympathise with that. Equally, my understanding is that the previous government didn't fund those, and so you know, it's a current situation is a if you like, a compromise. There's then, I think, there's a government consultation about other changes to business rates. And I imagine we'll be responding to that. Nigel may want to come in a second and comment, and certainly the LGA will respond. And there are some questions there which might affect businesses, I suppose, questions about frequency of fairness, combating fraud, frequency of revaluation. One of the things the government says it wants to do is support the high street. To my mind, one of the things you would do there is you would look at a nationally levied online sales tax or something like that, so that you had more reliefs for, or you could then redistribute and have more support or less taxation of bricks and mortar businesses, but we'll have to see where that goes. So those are, I think, the things which are happening there, and maybe Nigel can briefly comment on whether he foresees us engaging with a consultation, and indeed whether he's happy to share a draft response with you.
Thank you, Ed. Nigel.
I think yes and yes, basically, in answer to those two questions. Yes, or yes, we will be responding, and yes, I'm happy to circulate a response, actually. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's what I like, a nice brief response. Fantastic. Oh, sorry, Alex.
Yeah, apologies for the question. It's a kind of checking of facts. Been out of circulation, so I'm a little behind. Paragraph 42C, car parking income increase. It notes the Oxpens car park is due to close in 25-26. Is there any other car park that is noted as closing, specifically Worcester Street, or is the assumption that any scheme there is going to fall outside the 4 years of the budget?
Nigel, one for you, I think.
Yeah, simply to say it's the latter assumption, basically, that any changes on Worcester Street car park will fall outside the budget. I'm not aware that any other car parks closing, basically.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Lovely. Okay. With that, I am going to, I'm looking carefully around the room, but I think that's everyone covered for today. So can we then approve the budget and recommend it to council for consultation? I think, or are we just recommending it for consultation at this stage? I should remember which one it is. It goes to council first, doesn't it? Does it? No, it just goes to consultation. Right, sorry. Right, we are just recommending it to go out for consultation. So, and then we will have a fulsome discussion in council after it comes back from consultation. Sorry, my apologies, everybody. Is everyone happy to recommend this for consultation, subject to the change of appendices as Ed set out? Thank you very much, everybody. That is agreed unanimously. So we are then on to item 12, which is controlled parking zones and SIL spend. And I believe that is Louise.
Thank you. So just a reminder for our massive television audience that the SIL, the Community Infrastructure Levy, is a charge that we levy per square metre on developments when we give them planning permission. And we then use this money to fund an assortment of things that help the city function well and that could be thought of as infrastructure. So the purpose of this report is to approve releasing £358,000 from this pot to Oxfordshire County Council to spend on reviewing 7 existing controlled parking zones, CPZs, within the city boundary. So CPZs are entirely the responsibility of the county council. They are the local highway authority. 6 years ago, we agreed to contribute £500,000 from our SIL pot to rolling out a programme of CPZs across the city. And we agreed to do that because basically they support our planning and transport policies very specifically, so that it means we can bring forward residential sites for development at a higher density, but with low parking provision, while ensuring that the surrounding streets, which may already be bumper to bumper with parked cars, don't get overwhelmed by more cars. The county's funding is about to fund 11 new CPZ zones itself directly. And so they've instead asked if they could spend the money we are giving them on reviewing some of the existing ones to check that they are sort of working well. They've prioritised them based on how old they are, I think. And some of them are very old and have weird restrictions, like the one I think in your ward, Susan, that I think you technically described as bonkers, as it still acts as if it's deterring sort of non-existent football fans parking around the old stadium that no longer exists. Football stadium. So this is actually quite a good opportunity, I think, to improve them, get some input from local residents. I know a recent review of one of the South Oxford ones was really useful, tidied up a lot of loose ends. And for example, it's an opportunity to do things like some of the new CPZs have provisions just to be able to park for 2 hours, for example, which can be very popular with residents and businesses. So just to say that the £358,000 is the worst case scenarios. We expect that some of the CPZs will result in very little or no work. So any money left over from that pot, once the 7 reviews have been completed, will be returned to our general SIL fund. So just to be clear, this is about reviewing existing CPZs. It's not about creating new ones. And since we hold the purse strings here, we will be pressing county to ensure that these reviews are being led by local people and finding out what works for them.
Thank you, Louise. Yes, may I just, on behalf of residents in my own ward at this particular point, welcome this, because it is indeed the case that the one in Churchill Ward at Gypsy Lane does reflect a non-existent football stadium, which hasn't existed there for a really very long time. And therefore it is inadequate. It doesn't do what you'd hope it would do in terms of restricting parking. And there's also some roads which are not in it, which really frankly ought to be. So we've been asking for a review of that particular parking scheme for a very long time. And I'm pleased that the county are now finally going to do that. However, I do want to emphasise that it is really important that they do engage with city councillors as well as county councillors over this. And we will expect, as part of releasing this money, to see that engagement with city councillors and as well as local residents. So thank you. And I see the hands all shoot up. So Linda and then Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really pleased to hear that we will be using our influence to ensure that the County Council do consult with residents on this. You know, it's something that they've not been very good at when it comes to transport and highways matters. But I think there is a real opportunity here for them not just to consult with residents, but with local businesses as well. I think when you look at some of the newer CPZs that have been put in, they often have greater flexibility in terms of the resident parking spaces, and visitors can park in them without a permit, sometimes for up to 2 hours, but sometimes less than that. And I think there's real opportunities across East Oxford in particular, which generally the area is covered by older CPZs which don't have that flexibility, and there's very limited visitor parking for visitors without permits. Yeah. And in the last year or so, there's been a big decrease in the number of parking spaces for visitors to the area, for people visiting local businesses. And I really do hope that this review provides an opportunity to look at creating possibilities for visitors, more possibilities for visitors to park in the side streets, say on Cowley Road, Iffley Road, so they're able to visit some of the great businesses in that area more easily.
Alex.
I agree with that as a point of principle, but my question is kind of like going back a stage to, is this an appropriate use for SIL funds? And I did a little bit of research and dug out the DCLG's document on this from about 10 years ago. So it's a question is, has this been changed? Because this is my understanding of it. So I went to what is paragraph 10 in that, which is how will the levy be spent? And it says, local authorities are required to spend the levy's funds on the infrastructure needed to support the development of their area, and they will decide what infrastructure is needed. The levy is intended to focus on the provision of new infrastructure and should not be used to remedy pre-existing deficiencies in infrastructure provision, unless those deficiencies will be made more severe by new development. And looking at some of these examples, there is no new development anywhere near them. The levy can be used to increase the capacity of existing infrastructure or to repair failing existing infrastructure if that is necessary to support development. So what you're suggesting does, I mean, these are things which are needed doing 20 years ago. There's no doubt about that. But what I would be slightly worried about is that the SIL funds aren't supposed to be used on doing this. And perhaps we just need to check, because what we don't want is, or the county council don't want either, is somebody doing a legal challenge to go, you are spending SIL in an inappropriate way, and that money being withdrawn from this project, perhaps after the county council have incurred a whole load of expenditure. Doesn't seem, I would want to be a lot more sure than we appear to be.
Emma, I'm going to ask you to comment on this. You may wish to not comment at this particular point in time, but I'm handing over to you.
This isn't an area of my expertise. I do think it's a valid question to be put. What you may want to consider is whether you agree the principle, but we look at the recommendation in terms of delegating it to officers, subject to that being ironed out, perhaps in consultation with Councillor Upton.
So
Yeah,
my suggestion would be to agree that, and if it turns out this is a problem, to switch this funds to the 11 new ones and take the same amount from the 11 new ones that the county council has got from wherever it's got it from and assign it to this job instead. Just swap it.
Yeah, I think we'd want to have a further discussion about that. So let's see where we get to. Okay, I am going to suggest that we move to approve the request, but subject to taking some further advice. And also, I have to say, subject to the other points that we made, which is about there being adequate consultation with both city councillors and city residents and businesses on the schemes. So, Lorraine, sorry, Lorraine, I had missed you. Do speak.
Sorry, I just thought I'd just come in very, very quickly because obviously the SIL regulations do change from time to time and from year to year, basically. I think maybe 10 years ago this may have been the case, but looking at the levy and the regulations now, I think you'll find that infrastructure is sort of being expanded, and I think you'll find now that it's the provision, improvements, replacement, operation and maintenance of infrastructure. So it has actually expanded to and is a bit more flexible than originally what was first suggested when it first came into operation, and these have changed it. And I quickly had a look at the Planning Act as well, 2008, just to double check. But I think we can obviously look further into it after this meeting, but I think we find we're okay with that expenditure on the CPZs.
Good. Well, that's reassuring, but I think we obviously have said that we would want to make that sort of double check. So I think we'll still sort of add that sort of proviso, which will allow you to do that. Emma.
So can I just so we get it correct in the minutes, can I just check what the recommendation is going to be? Do you want to approve the principle of it, but final decision on it delegated to the head of planning in consultation with Councillor Upton, following advice on the queries raised during the meeting?
That seems like a very sensible way of approaching it to me. So is everyone happy with that? Yep. Okay. If everyone could show, that would be great. Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, we are now on to another report for Louise, which is the agenda item 13, the integrated performance report. No, sorry, it's not for you. Don't worry, don't panic. It's the integrated performance report for quarter two. It said, I beg your pardon, wrong report.
Yeah, I'll be really brief with this one, Susan. I mean, this is our regular monitoring report. I don't think it springs massive surprises. We will spend more money than we anticipated this year, mainly after lots of swings and roundabouts because of the pressures from temporary accommodation, which are being heroically managed, but which but are still there, very much there, and which have been well discussed in the past. On the HRA side, also some adverse variance, which is discussed in the report, and areas which we're looking to address. I think one interesting point is just as well as the higher void costs because of more houses coming into the HRA. That of course is a good thing, but that there are more homes coming in, but it's a side effect. But on the capital programme, the slippage is detailed, and it's also something which is discussed, in the budget report. Conversation Nigel and I had is whether we are doing what we can to amend our budget and put forward a budget next year, which takes into account the trends from this. That doesn't mean, if there's an overspend, we just accept it for eternity. Of course, it doesn't. But equally, sometimes if things are unavoidable, then we do need to, to amend our future budget plans. And I'm confident that that's the case. So with that, I'd like to move the report.
Thanks very much, Ed. Nigel, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't think there's anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? No? Okay. Well, in which case, can we note the report? Yep. Thank you very much. We are now on to the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review. So Ed, again, back over to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to keep this one quite brief as well, Susan, if you like. So this is the update on our Treasury management position, inevitably some quite big numbers, and big numbers that are responsive to interest rates. And you'll see that's actually driving a favourable variance for us in this report. The other point which is discussed in this report, although Cabinet's had a previous confidential heads up, is around the closure of one of the property funds which we've invested in, and I would just note that overall, notwithstanding that unwelcome development, our investment in that fund has been financially beneficial to the council compared to putting the money in the bank. With that, I'd like to move the report.
Thanks very much, Ed. Nigel, again, anything to add?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, any questions or comments? No. Okay, in which case, can we thank the thank officers for the report and note the performance? Agreed. Thank you. We are now on to the report that I was thinking of when I referred to you earlier, Louise, which is the Authority Monitoring Report. So that is over to you.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, so the Authority Monitoring Report, which is a statutory requirement, it sets out how well we are doing, sort of seeing through the policies that we have set out in our own planning policies. And it does this around three overarching objectives around building a strong economy, building vibrant and healthy communities, and protecting our natural and built environments. There's also within this report the infrastructure funding statement, which is another statutory requirement, which reports the stats on the amount of developer contributions that we've collected, and that's both the Community Infrastructure Levy and Section 106 agreements. Obviously, Section 106 agreements are things that are specifically allocated to particular named projects. And also in that IFS, we set out how much we've spent in the last financial year and what is planned in the Council's capital programme, which you'll see in the budget statement. I just wanted to pick out one or two highlights. So there's been a lot in the news recently about house building with the ambitious targets from the new government who are intent on trying to boost housing supply in a country where house building has lagged behind population growth for well over a decade. Our annual monitoring report shows that when a council is serious about trying to solve its housing issues, because we have overcrowding, people doing long commutes to get here, we've got people living in shared housing well into their 30s. When a council is serious about building homes, so serious that we created our own housing company, OX Place, to do it, so serious that we approached every landowner in the city to ask them to bring forward land for housing. When you do all that, then you can achieve a lot. You can see the AMR shows that there have been 365 houses built in Oxford in the last year, and that includes 61 really affordable homes, the vast majority of those being on City Council projects on City Council land. And what's particularly pleased with is the fact that this means that the cumulative total from when this particular local plan started, the cumulative total is now above where we had planned to be at this stage. We've 4,145 completions against a target of 4,076, which is fantastic news, particularly when you think that it includes just shy of 1,000 affordable homes of various types. So, that's 1,000 households on lower incomes who are now able to live in Oxford. And I think we ought to be very proud of that. One other item of note, I think, is the massive increase in employment floor space in the city. The demand for research and development space has gone almost literally through the roof in that all these buildings are taller. And that's because our science and business parks on the edge of the city are being built out. It's because, Botley Road landowners are converting furniture stores into cutting edge science buildings. You know, and this underlies the fact that in large part, thanks to our life sciences and technology companies, Oxford is one of the major drivers of the UK economy. So on that kind of positive note, I'm now going to hand over to Sarah Harrison, who's the brains behind the report. And I think we've also got Rachel Nixon online, who might have things to say.
Thanks very much, Louise. It's really helpful. And so, yeah, Sarah and Rachel, over to you. Sarah first.
I don't think I've got anything to add to the introduction. Thank you.
Oh, after that build up. Oops, sorry, Rachel, did you want to add anything?
No, sorry, I also have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Alex.
Yeah, I had a question about, I mean, obviously this is a comment, this is a report about past, but we're about to move into a new sunlit upland, which is when we get to May or June or whenever it is next year, our local plan will be more than 5 years since we approved it, and it will therefore be technically out of date at that point. Is it yours or whoever's thinking that some of the slight delays, and you can see there's a slight reduction in production over the last, say, 12 months or so, is that because we've got developments which are waiting to find out whether our local plan is about to change, or as it transpires, thanks to the inspectors being less than helpful, forcing it into a period where it's going to be out of date until we get it revived. Is that what's happened, or is there something else that's caused that slight delay? Is there some other factor? Because if you look at the number of particularly residential developments, they've dipped down a little bit, and is that the consequence? And are there any thoughts as to what could happen as a result of the new government's thinking on planning, which is more robust than the previous government's, and the potential impact of having an out-of-date local plan?
Sarah, did you want to have first dibs on that one?
The local plan is pretty much, unless it can be shown otherwise, automatically assumed to be in date up to the 5 years. After that point, it could be challenged to say it was out of date, but we could make a case that it isn't. And there'll probably be more discussion about this when we bring our report on the new timetable. But obviously we'll be continuing to work on a new local plan, which will be showing where we think there might be changes and where we think there aren't changes, which will help to support the plan that we already have as well in many areas. I think that there has been a fall off in the last year that you can see in the annual monitoring report, as you've picked up, in the number of permissions for housing developments. There are bound to be a huge number of reasons for that. I don't think much of it's related to the age of the local plan at all. Obviously, for that monitoring year, we had our new plan in progress anyway, and it would have been fully expected to come in before the end of that local plan. But I think there's so many factors, largely because it's just been developments which are not residential, which are coming forward in appropriate locations for those which aren't necessarily appropriate for residential development. A lot of our large sites had already delivered. There's a few more in the pipeline, which will be, but in terms of permissions, it will be a reliance on the smaller sites, which is just a lot more unpredictable. But changes in the economic climate, and particularly the value in economic developments at the moment compared to residential, is probably a large part of it.
Thanks very much. Don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that. Sorry, Nigel.
I just point out an area for clarification maybe in the document, which is under employment land. We talk about employment land on page 293. We normally measure in square meters. I'm sorry I'm being pedantic here, but the penultimate bullet point has a very large number and no reference to square meterage, and I don't quite understand it. So I just think there's been a bit of a typo problem going on here. So maybe somebody might like to go and have a look at that. We talk about total gain of employment floor space permissions. We have a massive number compared to 8,828 square metres in the previous monitoring year. So I think there's just a bit of an explanation or typographical error, which may need
I'm
to be-
trying to find the right bit, but there were an awful lot more employment permissions last year than there had been previously. So the number, I will try and check the number, but it is a much bigger number.
It says total gain of employment floor space, brackets permissions, 84,602.00. And then I think it should say metres squared. It looks like it's just missing.
That's right.
Compared to 8,000
That's right.
metres squared in the previous monitoring year. So yeah, I think it literally is just missing a metre squared. But that is a really huge increase, isn't it?
That's what made me think, hey,
Yeah,
whoa,
yeah,
what's going on
yeah.
here? That would be amazing.
But,
That was true.
But I believe it is.
Yeah, so,
yeah.
but we do measure it in square meters, so I think we need to
We
go back
do,
to the,
yeah.
the proper,
So I think
the
it's
proper
just a-
currency, as it
yeah,
were.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be so pedantic.
No, but it's interesting. So Anna.
Sorry, I have a really stupid question, which I should have raised earlier than this, but we report permissions for employment land, but not completions, but housing is completions, not permissions. And why is it that way around?
Housing, it's both. Yes, but employment, we only do one, but I can't give you a good reason why.
Presumably because that's what we're required to do. Yeah, for whatever reason. Yeah. Okay. It's a good question, Anna, but I'm not sure we've got the direct answer at this point. So with all of those questions having been hopefully answered, is everyone happy to note the report? Because I assume that's, well, no, sorry, we are approving the report for publication subject to the addition of metres squared on that bullet point. And can we authorise the head of planning to make any necessary minor corrections such as metres squared? Everyone happy to do that? Great, thank you very much. Thank you for the report. We're now on to the Thriving Community Strategy update, and we have a plethora of cabinet members attached to this report. So I'm looking at councillors Linda, Joey, Alex and Lubna and saying, fight it out between you, who's leading on it?
I volunteered to lead on it. Thank you so much. This is just a progress report. As you can remember, when we are setting up the Thriving Community Strategy, we did promise to bring the progress report to this cabinet. Just want to thank the officers first of all, because this is hard work to produce this report, and for the fact that it's not entirely the council report, but we work with other partners. Also extend my thanks to the cabinet members. I know did put in a lot of work to change how the report was put in and suggesting all these measures. So thank you so much to you cabinet members. This report is quite important and we acknowledge it's listed on our corporate plan. The work involves, as I've alluded to, working with other partners, and I'm happy that we are taking a lead on this one. I just want to bring out some of our success or quick wins since inception of the community strategy, Thriving Community report. You have seen the successfully leisure contract signing, the work on the Liz Youth Hub, on the Liz Leisure Center, early pregnancy assessment unit at the Rosie Community Center, and also building of our community centers, that is Bullingdon and the new community center we're about to build in the Liz. Having said that, I'm so proud to be a member of this council that is working hard to reduce inequality in our city and making sure that our communities are enjoying Oxford places and spaces. If you look at the measures, we have come up with 11 measures there just to update how we to explain how we are managing and trying to improve our city. There are 11 of them, but one that stand out for me is Measure 4 that we are personally importing on the improvement of the young people swimming in Oxford. We have done a lot of work that is actually not in the report. For example, the free swimming for under 17, but also more leisure. I've employed somebody who's going around the schools to encourage schools to participate in using our leisure centers, and I've got evidence in that. So I can see that we are making progress. We can do better. There are 5 recommendations from the scrutiny, and all of them have been taken into consideration, and we have said, yes, we know for sure that when time comes, when this expires, we're going to even produce a better report and a better thriving community strategy report. I want to invite my colleagues, cabinet members, to say more if they wish to. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this report is an update on the Thriving Communities strategy, and it's a key part of the council's corporate plan. So the strategy addresses the inequalities that are identified in Oxfordshire's joint strategic needs assessment by uniting our leisure, culture, and community initiatives, and it's fostering collaborations for better outcomes. The notable achievements of this is that it's secured 2.8 million in external funding, and it's distributing 1.5 million annually through the Oxford Community Impact Fund, and it's delivering impact for youth and physical activity programs. So the investments in this community centres, the sustainability, the housing retrofits, and the further support residents, and it reduces these inequalities. So I've actually welcomed the recommendations from scrutiny, especially around highlighting Rosehill's early pregnancy assessment. And obviously, we're going to continue to promote successes and explore it further detail. But I'll now pass over to Councillor Linda Smith if she'd like to comment.
Thank you. Alex, did you want to?
No, that's all right. I mean, I absented myself from the difficult bit of this. What I did want to comment is what is important about this report, and it covers all sorts of things, is that back in 2021 or 22 or whenever it was, these 11 targets were established, and that's what we said we would monitor. And I think it's really important that we stick to those kinds of principles, that we're consistent, because it's quite easy to kind of write something fresh each time, and then you kind of don't have any kind of clear coherence. But going back and looking at the same things and saying, yes, we've done that now, or no, that's not gone as well as we wanted and we need to do something different to make it happen, is really important. So I think it's a really good principle and sets a good sort of standard to approach with other annual reports.
Thank you very much, all. Hagen, I can see you online, and as the person who I imagine wrote the report, perhaps you'd like to speak as well.
Thanks ever so much, Chair. And yeah, myself, colleague Paula Redway, obviously have contributed to the report. I think the relevant councillors have really eloquently, set forward the narrative on this, and I don't have anything to add on this. It's a huge amount of partnership work that's been undertaken. A lot of work, particularly with cultural partners and with the health system, particularly, has enabled this. So we're very much, working with the community deeply in relation to this strategy, which is absolutely core.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, Paula, I absolutely didn't mean to miss you out as well. Very core part of this. So, Paula.
Yeah, I'll just echo what's been said. It's very much a whole system approach, working with communities and the voluntary sector, but also working with our other statutory agencies too. The health, public health is in the mix too, and very much having a whole system approach, and working in a locality-based way too.
Thank you. I mean, one thing I'd like to add is that I think one thing that has changed since we first set out the Thriving Community Strategy is the greater engagement of the University of Oxford. And I think notably Caroline and I were meeting yesterday with Alex Betts, and I think it's very interesting how much more engaged they are in our local communities, and I think intends to be even more so over the next few years. So I think there's a lot that we can build on in terms of access to university and college for sporting facilities, for instance, but also their expertise, their students, their academics, their support from in all sorts of different ways, from policy to actual sort of help in schools and supporting our young people. A lot of this is already going on, but there is even more that we can do together, and we very much welcome it. And I would also like to say at this point that I'd like to thank Peter very much for all of his work on Thriving Community Strategy, because I know that it was your baby initially, I think. So thank you very much indeed. Peter, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think it's all been said, but thank you very much, Susan.
Right. Any other questions or comments? Lubna.
I'd just like to thank all the officers who worked really hard on this behind the scenes, and kudos to you, because this is a really important strategy. I know we've been working throughout the years on it from different angles, but you know, for you guys to put it together, really hats off to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, everybody. We are at this point, I think, heading to the recommendations, which are to note the update on the delivery of the strategy. Is everyone happy to do that? Lovely. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 17. It's the Blackbird Leys Development Project. Turning the page, compulsory purchase order. And I think this is a report which is in both Ed and Linda's name. So Linda, looking to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so phase 1 of the Blackbird Leys regeneration scheme is underway. That involves building new homes, the new shops and the new community centre. And we're now gearing up, getting our ducks in a row, ready for phase 2. And that involves doing this. This report is about doing the preparatory work in order to be able to use compulsory purchase order powers if necessary to get on with that phase 2. So the compulsory purchase order will be a last resort. We will seek to reach mutual agreements over the purchase of any privately owned flats or maisonettes or land within the red line in the report. But where that isn't possible, we will need to move to a compulsory purchase order. So this report this evening sort of allows us to get ready to do that. But if it does actually come to that, it will require another cabinet decision to actually authorise that particular CPO of the specific properties. So where we're talking about, it's the block in Blackbird Leys District Centre that's got the flat, that's got the shops at the bottom at the moment, and maisonettes upstairs, and that block does need to come down entirely in order to build a new residential block up to 8 stories tall, which will provide 98 new units of affordable housing. So I hope we can agree this report this evening.
Thank you very much. Ed, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that's covered it. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Did any officer, I'm not sure, sorry, which officer is leading on this report? Tom.
We've got Bruce McGroby and myself here. Susan, Bruce has joined just for this item, but I don't have anything to add. Don't know if Bruce, you do.
No, I don't think there's anything to add. It's been covered.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions or comments? Okay. In which case, it seems fairly straightforward. So can we agree the recommendation? Thank you very much. We are now on to item 18, which is disposal of City Council land. And I believe Emma has got a slight change to the recommendations. So I'm going to ask her to set that out before I then turn to Ed to present the report.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. It doesn't change technically what it is that you're deciding, but on recommendation 2, it just needs a bit of clarity and conditionality. So it should read, and I propose it's amended to agree the proposal to dispose of the land as set out within the report, subject to agreement of contractual terms, and then that flows on to the delegation that then has been made to officers.
Okay, so everyone assume that the recommendation now reads as Emma just described it. And Ed, over to you to propose the report.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. So obviously this has to be read in conjunction with the confidential appendix. I mean, I think what I can say in the public session, the public session is that any disposal of land follows a very careful process of considering the right balance between the control that comes with ownership on the one hand and the potential benefits of disposal, and some of those will of course be of a financial nature. There may be other potential benefits as well, and ordinarily as the council we would engage some expert independent advice on questions of valuation before disposing of an asset, certainly a significant one. We've been through that sort of process here, and the recommendation is indeed to make that disposal.
Thanks very much, Ed. Reminding everybody that the majority of the report is, of course, in the confidential agenda. I should ask at this point, does anyone want to move into confidential session to discuss the report in detail? I'm not seeing anyone indicating, so if you can restrict yourselves to the items that are on the open agenda, that would be marvellous. I can see Jenny and Jane online. Either of you want to add anything?
No, I've got nothing to add at this stage.
I'm assuming that's the same for you, Jane.
Yeah, that's nothing from me. Sorry, I was stuck on mute.
Don't worry. Thank you. Has anyone got any questions or comments? No? Fine. Well, in which case, can we note the contents of the report, agree item 2 of the recommendations as amended by Emma, and make the relevant delegation that's set out in the report? Is everyone happy to agree that? Thank you very much. Right, we are nearly there, folks. We are now on item 19, which is the minutes, and they are we're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting held on 13th of November as a true and accurate record. So can we please agree those minutes? Fantastic. So just leaves me to say that the date of the next meeting is 26th of January. Probably not 2022 though. I suspect that might be 2025 actually. So I hope it is actually the correct date. It's sometime in January anyway. Have a very happy New Year, everybody, and happy Christmas. So yes, thank you very much. Meeting is closed.